So, how do you stump an AI that seems, well, super intelligent? That's what we're diving into today. We're going to look at all the clever and sometimes shockingly simple ways researchers are pushing these models to their absolute breaking point.
All right, so let's get right into it. If you look at the headlines, AIs seem like they're just unstoppable, right? I mean, they're acing everything we throw at them. Law exams, medical boards, you name it. But it all leads to this massive question, the one that really matters. Are they actually reasoning, or are they just incredibly good at playing a high-stakes game of pattern matching?
And this, right here, shows you the problem perfectly. Take a look. On your standard benchmarks, the ones they've been trained on for ages, the top models are, well, they're geniuses, near-perfect scores. But then you hit them with something new, something tricky, like these enigmative puzzles. These aren't about book smarts. They're about creative thinking. And what happens? Performance completely craters. I mean, we're talking scores that are barely in the single digits. That massive gap, that's where the illusion of reasoning starts to fall apart. So this has kicked off what you can only describe as an AI testing arms race. It's this constant battle where, as soon as an AI masters one test, researchers have to scramble to invent an even harder one just to figure out if it's actually getting smarter. And what this really boils down to is a fundamental shift in what we're even testing. The old way was all about testing what an AI knows, like a pub quiz. How much information has it memorized? But these new tests, they're more like a cognitive gauntlet. They don't care what the AI knows. They care what it can figure out on the fly. Can it think laterally? Can it pick up a tool and use it? Can it connect clues that seem to have nothing to do with each other? That's the new game. All right, let's enter the first level of this gauntlet. And what's fascinating is that to spot the cracks in these super intelligent systems, you don't always need some ridiculously complex puzzle. Nope, sometimes all it takes is poking at these really simple, almost comically basic flaws in their logic. Just look at this. It's just a perfect example. You ask a top-tier AI, who is Tom Cruise's mother? Easy. It spits out Mary Lee Pfeiffer instantly. But then you just flip the question around. Okay, so who is Mary Lee Pfeiffer's son? And suddenly, nothing. The AI gets confused, says it doesn't know. It's a complete breakdown of what, to us, is the most basic common-sense logic. Yeah, this weird little quirk actually has a name. It's called the reversal curse. And here's why it happens. The AI hasn't learned that Tom Cruise and Mary Lee Pfeiffer are related in a mother-son way. No, it's just learned that the sequence of words Tom Cruise's mother is very, very likely to be followed by Mary Lee Pfeiffer. It's just predicting the next word. The reverse phrasing, though, is way less common online, so it never built that statistical link. It's proof that it's not actually thinking. It's just doing incredibly advanced autocomplete. And believe me, the reversal curse is just the beginning. It turns out these systems are surprisingly brittle. You can trip them up in all sorts of ways. For example, just add a few distracting, totally irrelevant details to a simple problem and watch its performance just tank. Ask it to deal with probabilities or uncertainty, it gets lost. Or try this. Take a straightforward logic problem but wrap it up in a little story. Suddenly, the AI can't see the logic anymore. And maybe worst of all, they're terrible at just saying, I don't know, when a question is confusing or unanswerable. Okay, so we've seen how to trip them up on simple logic. But how do you test for deeper, real-world problem solving? Well, researchers are basically building digital escape rooms for AIs. This quote from the researchers behind Enigma Evil just nails it. The whole point is to move beyond simple Q&A. The real challenge is finding out if the model can synthesize information. Can it actually take a bunch of seemingly random clues and weave them together to find the one hidden solution? It's about discovery, not just memory. A really elegant way they do this is with the needle in a haystack test. The idea is brilliant in its simplicity. You take one tiny, crucial fact, the needle, and you hide it somewhere inside a massive wall of text, the haystack. Then you just ask the AI a question that requires finding that one fact. It's a pure test of its attention span, of whether it can actually process and recall everything you've given it. But here's where it gets really interesting. Finding one needle? Most top models are pretty good at that, maybe 95% accurate. But what happens when you hide, say, 4 needles, and the AI has to find and combine all of them to get the right answer? Well, the accuracy totally falls off a cliff, down to something like 60%. And that tells you something huge. Finding stuff is not the same as understanding it. And then things get even more complex. You've got benchmarks like Gaia, which are designed to push the AI to act like a real assistant. The problems themselves are things a human could solve pretty easily, but for the AI, it's a huge test. It has to figure out how to use tools like a web browser or a file reader on its own. It has to look at images, scan documents, and chain together a whole series of actions to find the answer. It's a real-world test. Okay, now we're going to shift gears and go to let's call it the dark side of AI testing, jailbreaking. This is a whole different ballgame. The goal isn't to test if the AI is smart. The goal is to trick it, to manipulate it into breaking its own safety rules. This is where things get truly adversarial.
So what is jailbreaking? At its core, it's about writing a prompt so cleverly that you trick the model into giving you an answer it's absolutely not supposed to. It's a crucial part of making AI safe, actually. It's called red teaming. You basically hire people to act like hackers and find all the security holes in your system so you can patch them before the real bad guys find them.
And this isn't just random hacking. Researchers have actually mapped out the entire landscape of these attacks. What you're looking at here is basically a field guide to AI deception. They've grouped them into 7 main families of tricks. It's like a playbook for security researchers, giving them a systematic way to test for every known type of vulnerability. So how do you actually pull this off? Well, there are a few classic moves. A big one is impersonation. You tell the AI to roleplay as a character who doesn't have any rules. Or you can try cognitive overload. Just bury your harmful request inside a massive, confusing prompt, hoping it gets lost in the noise. Another one is goal conflict. You tell it to ignore its safety rules and prioritize some other harmless-sounding goal. And, of course, there's good old-fashioned obfuscation. Disguising bad words by putting dots between the letters. Okay, so we've looked at all these ways to confuse, trick, and basically break these incredibly powerful AI models, which might leave you wondering, what's the point? Is this just about finding bugs? It's actually way, way bigger than that. I mean, is this whole thing just some academic game to see who can write the cleverest prompt? The answer is a hard no. The stakes here are genuinely huge. Here's why it matters so much. First, safety. Every time we find a way to stump an AI, we find a vulnerability that needs to be fixed before it can be exploited. Second, trust. We can't really start depending on these systems until we know exactly where their limits are. And finally, this is how we measure real progress. Stumping these models is what forces us to build better ones, to move away from systems that are just expert mimics and towards systems that can truly, genuinely think. And all of this kind of forces us to rethink what intelligence even means. Maybe the ultimate test for an AI isn't about always having the right answer. Maybe it's about knowing what to do when there isn't a clear answer. How does it handle being confused? How does it deal with ambiguity? That is the real challenge and the real frontier for building truly intelligent machines.